There we go. We're live here today. Yay.
Yeah.
Except nobody's watching because we're doing it privately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how these things work, so you have to let me know. As I said, I'm technologically challenged, like most people my age, a lot of people my age. So, yeah. So you asked me about
most people with our background.
Yeah, let's just say there's real validity in that. Like former plain people are really technologically challenged.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, if you didn't grow up even with radio or TV, you know,
we weren't.
I'm sure you can relate. You didn't even have plugs to put it in. We at least had the plugs as Mennonites, but you weren't allowed to put it in.
Yeah. Couldn't have that.
But my parents were a little bit more liberal than many in the Lancaster Conference Mennonite Church, and at least liberal-minded. And and I was the baby of the family, so I think they ignored things with me a little bit more than other parents might have. And I just, we had talked a little bit about how when I was a child, I came to be fascinated with Black culture. And I got myself a radio. We weren't supposed to have radios, but my parents actually did have one, which they put away when the bishop came. And they allowed me to have one. I think I found an old radio somewhere, and they allowed me to have that in my bedroom. And the first thing I listened to was Black gospel music from Philadelphia. So that's how I kind of got interested in that. And then, I mean, I was not unaware of Black people. We lived closer to Philadelphia than most in the Lancaster. We lived in Chester County. And so that is closer to Philadelphia, and our church was a little bit more progressive than most of the Lancaster Conference churches, but we still had to adhere, to their rules. At least when the bishop came around.
You have to put the radio away.
Yeah, put the radio away.
Don't let them hear that blasphemous Southern gospel music. That'll send your soul straight to hell, right?
Well, it was funny because my mother didn't like it at all, but I said to her, "This is gospel music," and then she couldn't really say no. I mean, how could she say no? You cannot listen to gospel music. So she still didn't like it, but she couldn't tell me I couldn't listen to it because it was gospel music. But anyway, then I eventually, I always wanted to go to Africa, and I did go in the Peace Corps. The last year of my college, the Peace Corps recruiters came around, and then I said, "This is how I'm going to get to Africa." So, but we had talked about a long history of how you leave a group like this. And I think, I don't know, I mean, some people leave, like cold turkey. Like, I have had it, you can take this and shove it. But most of us leave, incrementally, a step at a time, a step at a time, a step at a time. I mean, we do exactly what they say will happen, if you do this, it's going to be a slippery slope. Then you're going to do that, and this can lead to dancing and so forth. And so, and that was my story. It took me a long time to leave the Mennonites, but I left it essentially because of who I am, who I was, and it just didn't fit with them. Who I was in a lot of different ways.
So, did you ever feel alone?
Yes, extremely. One thing I should say that my family, you may notice that I have a name that doesn't sound Mennonite, Lamp. And my father converted to the Mennonites when he married my mother. My mother's name was Landis. So my relatives are all Landis and Ebersol and, all those Mennonite names, Hess. But my father was sort of taken in by the Mennonites because he had a difficult family situation. And they lived right next to the Mennonite church. And so he wanted to marry my mother, and she said, you have to become a Mennonite if you want to. So he did. And, they often say that converts are even more zealous than the normal members, the inheritance members, And so he became that way. But so I had, and my father had no cousins, no brothers, no sisters, no siblings. I mean, he had cousins, yeah, but he had no siblings. So I had 52 cousins on my mother's side. There's Mennonite and Amish families, and 52 cousins on my mother's side, and 0 on my father's side. So I grew up with my mother's family, and we were Mennonites. So that kind of alienated us. So I really didn't have a Lamp family. My father's family didn't really exist for me. So I grew up in the Mennonite family. But I still had some characteristics, and they didn't fit in with the Mennonites. I was a little bit freer. I was a little bit more emotional. And we talked about this before. You don't be emotional if you're a Mennonite. And probably an Amish too. You don't show emotion. We don't like a lot of hilarious laughing. We certainly do not like anger.
Oh no!
And so you have to be pretty stone faced and sober minded. I mean, they would say this all the time. You have to be sober minded, and even as children. So I didn't really fit in that well, and even as a child. But then, of course, not being, not being the kind of rough and tumble boy that they wanted me to be, and certainly that my father wanted me to be, I didn't fit in that way either. So, I mean, one of our leaders at the Mennonite church, leaders of the
I was like that. I was a very bookish child. I always wanted to read and write.
Yeah. I wasn't so bookish, but I was more art oriented, artistic.
Well, and was there space for you to be artistic?
Well, my father was artistic. My father also was somewhat outside the loop because he, the rest of them, the Mennonites generally were farmers or carpenters or something like that, working with your hands. But my father became, he started a sign business. So he painted signs. And he was very artistic that way. And also before he was married, he was a musician. He was a singer. and he actually had studied opera and professional singing. So he was artistic, and my mother was a bit artistic too.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't. There was no dancing allowed. That's for sure. And but sometimes my mother would dance around in the kitchen. Again, not when the bishop was there. So I did grow up a little bit with that.
That's
slightly
so
different.
interesting that you say that. Because in my
In your what?
Okay, I'm sorry. There's a bit of a lag. I was just going to go back and touch on what you said about being like artistic. Like, there's kind of a subtle cultural difference between the Amish that I grew up with that come from German descent and those that
Yeah.
came from like Bern, Switzerland that were of Swiss descent. Because there was a lot of laughter in our house, and Dad had an accordion that he brought out every once in a while. There was a harmonica. So there was
Wow.
a small appreciation, for art.
Yes.
But we were a little bit on the liberal side as well. I didn't really realize that until later on, and then hearing the
Yeah.
conservative stories of people, from the conservative
Where are
community,
you from? I know
and
where Mary
realizing,
is.
no, our family really wasn't all that conservative compared to others. Yeah.
Were you you not from Lancaster County?
I'm from Southwest Michigan.
Oh. Uh-huh.
No.
Yeah. Well,
Southwest Michigan, and then my dad's family came from Bern, Indiana, from the Swiss Alps down there. Yeah.
oh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
See,
Well,
and you. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I know there is a big difference, and it's not that people don't laugh and have fun. I mean, I had an aunt who was just jolly and constantly telling cracking jokes and so forth. But she was thought lesser of because of that. And even her children would say, "Oh, mom, you shouldn't, be so frivolous."
Well,
Yeah.
and one thing that I heard a lot of, because the laughing, I laughed too loud. I was too much. I was
Yeah.
too much. You
Yes.
know.
Yeah, I was very boisterous.
Yeah.
Very.
I am
just
too. I see you gesticulate.
Too much. Right.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
So
I am
one
the same
thing.
way.
not.
I'm the same way. And yeah, there's a sort of cap on it. You can show a little bit, but there's sort of a cap on it.
It has to be like through like a veil of stoicness. Like you're supposed to be more stoic, and if you go above that, that's when you get in trouble for it.
That's
and the other thing, like I don't know if James, I don't know if you understand this, but like they used to say to me, "Ola lahavatsi fakare bana," which basically means is all your laughing will end in tears, in crying.
Oh, yes, right. And
so did they do something like that?
Yeah. Well, I know that when I was a child, one thing that started alienating me from from my own Mennonite church, was that because I had these characteristics, I was not included in the inner circle, and it was partly my name, because Mennonites and Amish are an ethnic group. And, if your name was King or Mast or,
Byler,
Byler,
or
Brubaker, and
Landis
and Ebersol and all those names, then you fit in. But, they would always ask when we would go Schwartz, yeah, the Schwartz is apparently in there too. Well,
Yeah.
we had some Schwartzes in our church too,
Hmm.
um, and I don't mean black people.
Mhm. Mhm.
No.
So, but they, you weren't supposed to be too silly, and that kept. I realized later in life, they very rarely. They would sometimes ask young boys and girls to read the Bible, do the reading of the Bible in church, and or lead the singing and that kind of thing. And I realized later they never asked. They very rarely asked me. I
Mhm.
wasn't considered. Well, I was told one time. Uh, Later in life, I went to Goshen College for 1 year, and my buddy and I, my best buddy, Minninger is his name, good old Mennonite name. We both applied for the Teachers Abroad program, TAP. It's a Mennonite program where you go and teach abroad in third world countries, mainly. And he got admitted, and I didn't. And then I asked them why, and they said, "We don't think you're spiritual enough."
What
So,
does that even
Mm.
mean?
yeah. Well, partly it means being sober-minded, you know,
I mean,
having
but
having
like
a certain aura about yourself that is quiet and not over the top and that kind of thing.
you're supposed to be clothed and robed in the garments of humility and
That's right.
obedience.
Yep.
Mm.
And not to, a certain soberness, a quality of soberness. That's what they wanted.
Mhm.
And I noticed that when I was a child. And one time, what really sticks out in my mind, they had a poster contest once a year. I don't remember exactly what it was about, but it was to promote the reading of the Bible, I guess. And I made a poster, and I was very artistic, and my poster was fabulous. And there's just no doubt about it. I mean, they would put up the posters, somewhere, I forget where, in the church, and then they voted on them. And my poster was like a professional job. And they said, "You didn't do that." And they said, "Your father did that for you." And we argued. My father, he didn't swear because you're not supposed to swear, but he said over and over, I did not help him with that. He did that himself. And they wouldn't believe me. And I thought they would have believed the other boys, you know, but I didn't measure up in their minds. And so I'm probably a liar too, you know. That really hurt me.
Mm.
I remember that still to this day, and I was
Mhm.
only, maybe 10 years old. And it was one of the defining moments where I said, these people can, you know,
Hmm. Because you do something well, and they immediately accuse you of it, of one, you're using somebody else's work, or you didn't do it, or like it's just not possible.
yeah,
There's no like, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. Like I
yeah,
really appreciate this. I love it. It's
right.
fantastic. Like
And
it makes me think
they
about
couldn't take my
this.
word for it.
Yeah.
My word wasn't good.
Yep. And they accuse
So,
you of being a liar, and
yeah,
lying is a sin. And now there's a possibility your
Mm.
soul's going
Mhm.
to hell
Mhm.
because,
that's right.
oh my God, you lied,
Yeah,
according to them.
that's right. So that was a defining moment. I thought back about that a lot of times. That's when it really hit me. I do not fit with these people. They don't accept me.
Mhm.
They never will accept me as I am. And so that was one of those, markers in my life that helped me to
Mhm.
De-
move
Mhm.
on.
deconstruct.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it was a good thing.
Do you think it was because you were a little bit? was it a combination of both your father wasn't born into the community, and also the fact that you were not this rough and tumble boy that they typically want to see? Was it a
Yes.
combination of those two things, or was it just one or the other?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of those things and other things that I didn't seem to have the mentality. I mean, there are a lot of things, personality characteristics that go along with being a Mennonite or an Amish. Um, they're definitely different in a lot of different ways. We talked about this before, things that characteristics I still hold today because of being a Mennonite. But a lot of those, and it's not just me. I mean, other people have told me this who did have total Mennonite heritage. That because they were a little bit different, they were ostracized, and so I was made to feel not really a part of the group, and it worked itself out in a lot of different ways. For example, I always remember, I will never forget foot washing at communion. And
That's something I haven't done in a long time.
well, that was one of the things when I was excommunicated that they said to me, that you haven't taken part in communion and done the foot washing and so forth. But I always, all the other boys would you picked your partner who you were going to do foot washing with. I don't know how they did this.
Oh, you got to pick?
Yeah.
We didn't get to pick. It was whoever sat beside you.
Oh.
There was no picking.
Yeah. Well, that would be better because everybody matched up with someone they liked. And when it was almost at an end, I would always be left there. No one had picked me.
Aww.
To do all the other boys would pick each other.
And so that
there would always be some, old man who was one of the last ones too, or maybe he already did it, but I was left every single time. I was left, the one left out at the end. And then some old man would come over and say, okay, I'll do your foot washing with you. That was humiliating, absolutely humiliating. And no wonder I hated communion.
That's like a form of social isolation, or it's kind of like when you start talking about the social hierarchy and the structure within plain communities, because there's always the good families, and then you have the families that are okay, and then you have the families that are there's that family, and it's like those are the families. Those are the families. And there's never, they could literally never do anything right.
Right, exactly.
And the ones up here, the ones who contribute a lot of money to the church, and they pay a lot of hospital bills and whatever it is that they bring to the table, and they're well respected, those families can do no wrong. They can get away with anything.
Yeah.
How horrible.
There was definitely a hierarchy, and it also affected families who were, who had the heritage 100%, but some way, had violated this or that, or had made themselves, had ended up as lesser. Yep. So in our church, there were the Brackbills and there were the Kings. And if you were a Brackbill or a King, you were on top. And But there are other families. For example, there was the Hertzler family. I mean, that's a good old Mennonite name too. But there was something, something amiss in the family, um, and so they suffered too from this hierarchical structure of good families and bad families, or problematic families and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's just one way that they socially isolate you from the rest of the community and exclude you if you're on the bottom of that ladder.
Yes.
Like, excluding you from the communion is just one way. That's not counting all the other things that happen where they excluded you.
Yeah, that's right. And then, and Mennonites aren't militaristic. They're supposed to be pacifists, but they still honor a kind of um, a kind of machoism. It's a patriarchy, definitely a patriarchy. Like I said before, my cousin said that
Sure,
the
sure.
man is the head of the woman.
You
That's
know what? That doesn't work for me, and this is why I made a bad Amish woman.
Yeah, I bet.
Period. Doesn't work for me.
That's right. And they have that. And if there's anything wrong, for example, some of our Mennonite families had, with 100% pedigree, some of them had some problems in the male line. Maybe I don't know, they're problem fathers, a lot of things. And that always sets you down to second or third class citizenship.
Yep.
So
And if you
you had to
can't
be
have
absolutely
children,
impeccable.
yep.
Yeah, that, and you could not have any blemishes. Or if you had, they had to be hidden, put in a closet. Because, we are
Perfection.
finding out later about
The Amish
things that
closet, yeah.
happen. Yeah. We're finding out later that some of these people who were upheld as such saints actually committed some pretty bad things, and it was kept quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Criminals.
there was the Taylor family who were Mennonite stock, and apparently, I read this later. Someone wrote about it, that there was sexual abuse with some, not one of his relatives, but one of the girls in the church, and the preachers told her to shut up. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that, but they told her to shut up. That
You know,
it caused problems.
it's sad because it's like this thing of like where the ministry
Wow.
comes in. This is why I say they're unequipped. They're not educated. They don't
Yeah,
have the resources. Is
that's
because
right.
when you have ministry
Yeah.
sitting there and giving perpetrators of abuse full access to more victims,
Yeah,
while only excommunicating them or shunning them or giving them bon and maidon, at the end of the day, you have done nothing except endanger that victim even more.
yes, that's right.
And not to mention, I literally talked to somebody
Mhm.
that left from my community not too long ago, and they told me that up until the day they left the community, I was still labeled as being unforgiving because I
Yeah.
reported it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're
You're the
supposed to be
wrongdoer.
silent. So you as the victim, that's horrifying, and it's sad because it's not
Right.
just Amish, it's not just your Mennonite branch.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So, but you know, I mean, I mentioned this before. To you, Mary, that when I was, I don't know exactly what age it was. I thought it was about 5 years. Some people said it was when I was 6 years, but a lot of people remember this. And my sister told me I was 4 years old, and she's 8 years older than me. So she was, you know,
Mm-hmm.
she was a teenager by the time this happened. And she said that, well, I knew at the time, and I never forgot this. I knew this at the time. I was cognizant of what was happening, and I knew, and I never forgot it. And that said, my father didn't like what I was becoming. As a 4-year-old boy, didn't like what I was becoming because I wasn't the rough and tumble boy that he had bargained for. And I didn't,
Mm.
you know, I didn't want to go out with the other boys playing, baseball and that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
and
I didn't either.
he told my mother not to show me any affection because he thought this is what is doing it. This is what they always said. You become gay because your mother babied you or that kind of thing, too close to your mother, which we all know now is a total lie. And he told her to absolutely cut out all affection.
Oh,
And
that's
so
horrifying.
there were no more hugs or no more kisses, no more pats on the head, nothing. I was just kind of set loose. Um, to find my own way.
Did you?
And I resented that. I knew, as they say, I knew that that's what happened at the time. And I became, later on, when I discussed this with my mother when I was an adult, later in life, um, she said to me, "You became like a stranger to me up through the time until I became an adult, and I became extremely withdrawn, and that just made it worse." And I couldn't trust my parents. I grew up with no trust for adults. I could not trust my
Hmm.
parents. I could not bring any problems to them because they would say, "Oh, that's your fault if you didn't act like that."
Hmm.
You know, you wouldn't get beat up,
Hmm.
or if you were right with the Lord. That's what my father always said. Well, if you were right with the Lord, a kid. I
So
have to
did
think,
you?
oh, I'm not right with the Lord. Gee, what do I have to do?
Did you
And
feel?
so, hmm,
Did you feel like it was your fault that you were not shown any affection?
well, I was told it was my fault. So,
How did that affect you?
well, I hated who I was. And I'm sure a lot of us go through this. I used to pray and pray and pray that I wouldn't
Same.
be like this. I mean, I
Uh,
prayed till I was blue in the face. I did everything you're supposed to do, right up through high school. And that's one reason I finally realized, what's the use of praying? What's the use of these beliefs at all? It's not going to help you. And but that really hurt me, and it made me withdraw more, and it made me I feel that it made me incapable to a large extent of showing love and putting my trust in someone because I wasn't shown any love by my parents. And by that time, my sisters were kind of grown up, and my sister went away to Mennonite school and so forth, and my oldest sister, and there was no one really to take it up with me. I think my oldest sister regrets that now. She feels kind of guilty that she did not save me from my father. Um, but I
Hmm.
realized that I got married finally to a woman, We were married for 13 years when I was 29 years old. And I went home. When we went home to visit my mother, my wife was horrified that I did not hug my mother. And she said, "You must hug your mother." And she said, "I don't care what went on in the past. You must hug your mother when you go home." And so I did. And my mother was like overwhelmed. Like after 25 years, finally, she was able to show some affection to her son and receive it.
I
And it was like an outpouring.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet.
Yeah. And I talked with her about it later, and she acknowledged that that's what she did. She acknowledged, she was a good Mennonite woman. She was a good Mennonite
Mhm.
wife. Her husband told her to do it, and she did it. I'm sure she didn't want to do it, but she believed what he said. I mean, even later in life, she said something to the effect that, people become gay. Not, and I never had this discussion with her. I never came out to my parents, but they knew.
Mhm.
But she said, people, she believes that men become gay because they don't have the love of their father, or their mothers are too close to them. She really believed that, even
None
to
of
the
that
end.
is true.
No,
None of that is true.
and my cousins, who are always trying to convert me. Um, I have this cousin Hess who is constantly on me. And
Mm.
he said that, he said, well, it's because of your father. And I said, it's because your father didn't show you love. And I said, you know, I didn't become gay because my father didn't show me love. My father didn't show me love because he could see that I was gay, or he could see that I
Mm.
was becoming that kind of a man. It
Oh,
wasn't the
yeah.
other way around.
Did you feel pressure to conform to societal norms?
You mean like
Like,
Mennonite societal norms?
kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
Like, do you
Yeah.
still get pressured to conform to their societal norms?
Not really, because I alienated myself from my family, my whole extended family. I alienated myself from them early on. In my 20s,
Hmm.
I decided I cannot be a part of this family. I mean, I can't. I would go to reunions sometimes, or I'd go with my parents to visit the cousins and the aunts and uncles, and I just realized how I can't be a part of them. And mainly, I realize they are pulling me down. They're dragging me down because they can't
Mm.
accept me as I am. And the only way I can be free is just not to have
Mhm.
anything to do with them.
Yeah,
And so, like for,
Right. Right.
50 years, I had nothing to do with them.
yeah.
And that was sad.
Hmm.
I wanted to have
There's people in my family that
relatives.
I haven't spoken to in a long time, and it's
Yeah.
just because they're incredibly toxic people. I would have to recognize that. It's just
Yes.
it is what it is. So, yeah.
And you
Yeah.
disagree with them on so many things, but more fundamentally, you just are not on the same page. Like you're in two different worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no
Right.
coming
Right.
together.
Exactly.
There's just no broaching that gap.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
That's so true.
Yes.
and I finally went to see them a few years ago, and I wish I hadn't. you know, I,
Oh.
I decided that I would like to. Here I'm 70 years old or whatever at the time, and you know, I would like family, and I don't have any family of my own. I don't have any children, anything like that. And so I did plan with them to get together with my boy cousins, because the girl cousins, my sisters and their cousins, who are all around the same age, they would get together once a year. And so I said to my one girl cousin who I was on good terms with, I mentioned this to her. The boy cousins never get together. And so she told her brothers, and then one thing led to another, and it happened that we all met down in Lancaster County, and it was nice. And I stayed with my cousin for a week, for 4 days. Stayed with one of my cousins, and they're all mostly like not conservative Mennonites anymore. Not, they don't wear the bonnets and the plain suits and all of that anymore. But their mindset has not changed.
Yeah.
It's just the dress has changed, yeah.
Mhm.
But they're still, in some
Mhm.
ways, worse than they were then, in terms of their mindset, in
I
terms
know.
of their
There's some people,
ability.
when you leave the Amish, like, why did you even bother? You just brought all of that belief system with you. I mean,
Yeah,
so you have a
yeah, the
car.
attitudes. Yeah, right. You're
Yeah.
not wearing your bonnet anymore, but you still, have the same narrow beliefs.
Well, my